Okay, I guess we're on air. This is Guy, and with me is Preachin Shawn. We had about 3 months ago, I guess, Shawn interviewed me on his channel, and so this is just kind of the other side of that, I guess, and we're doing this on my channel. Just my turn to interview Shawn and ask him some questions about his beliefs and so I guess, Shawn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, so my name's Sean. I got two channels on YouTube. The one is the Preachin Shawn, which is basically where I do a lot of my Bible teaching, and then I just have another one which in all honesty, I don't really remember the name of it. So I'll probably have to find
I
out
think
that
it's
link later. But
Shawn's.
that
I think it's Shawn C,
yeah,
isn't it?
Let's see, yeah, that's probably the name of the other channel, but that's the one that I interviewed. To have a guy on, and that one's more just for having conversations and getting people's opinions on things back and forth. And and I'm a Christian, and that's why I was interested in talking to Guy. And that's the basic introduction.
Great, yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, I used to be a believer, but I'm no longer a believer. I consider myself an atheist. Um, and so I guess let's get started. Shawn, for how many years have you kind of held the current beliefs that you have now?
Sure. Well, I would say that uh, even though I was raised in a Christian family, I don't really I don't really think that the faith was like anything of my own when I was at that young age. So it probably wasn't until the year. Um, Basically, I take the date of my salvation to somewhere in April of 2000. I don't know the exact day, but that would definitely, I would say, would be the point in which my adult life I made a decision, and ever since then I've been trying to live the way the Lord wants me to.
Okay. Um, was there ever a time in your life where you you had serious doubts or thought that you were not a believer?
Well, I think I would say yeah, because I'll try to keep this the condensed version as much as possible. Even though as a child I was kind of raised in it, there came a point in my life in which my parents divorced, and as soon as my parents divorced, us kids we stopped being taken to church, and we just weren't taken to church anymore. And I was given into the custody of my father, and he didn't really raise me up in the ways of the faith, and so because of that, I just kind of grew up, and God like really wasn't a part of my life at all, and so that's kind of just how God, I guess I would say, became really distant to me, and I think there was a point in my life in which I was really convinced in my head that I didn't believe in God, um, and, uh, and so I think at that point, and this is something that even recently I've been really thinking about because uh, for the longest time I was actually convinced that I didn't believe in God, but when I was studying and reading some things in the Bible lately, it kind of made me think that mindset would have actually been impossible. But it's really tough because I look back at it and I'm sitting here in my head thinking, well, I really seem to believe that I didn't believe in God at some point, which makes me think that um, if what the Bible is saying is true, and I did indeed know that God existed, it must have been so just subtle and underlying that it was hard for me to even tell the difference. So I think, obviously at that point, if you want to, I mean, I don't know if you would call it a doubt because I was pretty much well convinced of the fact that, hey, I really don't think that a God exists, or at the very least, I have no interest in following him, and I'm perfectly happy with my life um, as it is. And I would have held that position all the way up until I changed my mind.
Okay. So it's been probably, I guess, 14 or 15 years now that you've kind of been a dedicated believer. Is that fair?
Yep.
You said around 2000 or at some point. Um, how, let's say, on a scale from 0 to 100, where 0 is where you're certain that that belief is wrong, and 100 is that you're certain that it's right, and that your beliefs are true with regard to, the Bible, and God. Where would you place yourself on that continuum, I guess?
Let's see. At the current moment, eh, I would I would I wouldn't say 100 because to me 100% is kind of that would be like as if I physically saw God or heard His voice. That would be to me like in 100, and I haven't experienced that, so I wouldn't be in 100. And I'm thinking that um, I would either be a 99 or I would be somewhere in the 90s. And that kind of depends on how broad the spectrum is and where we would place everybody else on the scale. But
Sure,
at the very least, I would say I would definitely think I would be in the 90s.
that's fair. That's fair. Um, was there ever a time in your life when you think that you were were higher than you are right now, on that scale?
I see. Um, yeah, I was about to say I don't do drugs, man. But anyways, on that scale, let's see here.
Yeah, that was
No,
not my intended meaning at all. Sorry about that.
my mind is somewhere else. Anyways, uh, honestly, I don't think so. I think to me that would almost kind of be impossible because it seems to me like the more time that goes on, my faith just builds more. So I really don't think so. No.
Okay. Um, what
But
is
I
it,
will
or what
say,
kinds of okay?
well, I was just going to say, yeah, a little side thought that I thought about that is I thought, well, honestly, if my faith is building, then for me to say that I'm at a 99% might actually be a little inaccurate. It might be lower because if my faith can continually grow. So, just a side thought, but go on.
Sure. Yeah, and the I suppose the placement on that scale is a bit arbitrary. I mean, because you can't. It would be difficult to gauge, I'm sure, and I don't know, like, if I uh, was trying to gauge where I stood with regard to, let's say, even a belief that I'm very confident in, like the existence of my wife, for example. I might struggle to try and put a confidence value on that, I suppose. But it would be up there with, like 99% or something like that too. So, um, yeah, and if for that example, for my wife not to exist, there would have to be a whole lot, a whole lot of problems that uh, you know I would be suffering from, that would be very profound as far as my perceptions of reality. Um, so, um, can I ask? Could you give any kinds of examples of things that have contributed to building your faith up, and kind of keep you moving upwards on that scale?
Yeah, I would say that, well, two of them easily. I kind of prior to knowing about us meeting, I did a little refresher video because um, I have a video called "Why I Believe God Exists," and but a lot of times I have to remind myself of why I actually hold these positions, and so two of the things that I realized that were things that really convinced me were a lot of times I would just be reading the Bible, and it would talk about um, it would explain kind of how a person is thinking or what they're going to say or what they're going to do, and And then I could look back at times in my life and say, oh man, look at that. I did the exact same thing that the Word was saying that I was going to do, and I was thinking the exact same thing that it said that I was going to do. And I've observed that with other people too that I talk to as well. And so that just that gives me a profound amount of faith, because it just seems to, straightly, easily identify what people are really like, in their metaphoric hearts. And and the other thing that I think would be really big too would be uh, prayer, in the aspect of what I often some of the ways in which it is really demonstrated to me very obviously is a lot of times I'll just try to do something, and even though in the Bible it says to pray without ceasing, well, I don't always put that into practice. A lot of times I move ahead and I just do things on my own without praying about them. And a lot of times when I try to do these things or try to understand things, I totally fail on them. And then, almost as an act out of desperation, like because I'm desperate, then I'm like, oh yeah, I can pray. And then a lot of times when I pray, the thing that I couldn't understand or I couldn't do, I'm suddenly able to do. So that is definitely another thing that definitely bolsters my faith.
Okay. Um, so you gave kind of two examples there. Like one was the Bible, and how you as you read things, they can be somehow manifest in your life. Um, could you give like a specific example of something like that, or you don't have to if you can't think of anything? But that's I was just curious to what that would look like.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult to narrow it down to one, because a lot of times when there's so many to think of one, it seems ridiculous. Like we should be able to just pick up one, but off the top of my head, uh, I couldn't give you one. Maybe I'll think of one, but unfortunately,
Sure,
yeah,
that's okay. That's okay.
yeah.
I kind of put you on the spot there, but so I mean, one of the things that occurs to me in thinking about that, I'm a reader. I don't read as much as I'd like to, but I do read books, and I know that there have been times when I'll be reading just even a novel or something like that, and something will kind of resonate with me, either kind of on a philosophical level, or um, or that it will be somehow pertinent in my life at the time and in that moment. I know when I was reading through the Hobbit back years and years ago, I was in a point in my life where I was really frustrated. I was a believer at the time, but I was, just kind of frustrated with my position in the life and things. And there was a scene where they're going through this forest and whatever, and what is it, Frodo or It's Bilbo in the Hobbit. It's been a long time since I've read the books, but he climbs up to the top of the canopy and is looking out over, and he can see all this beauty and things. Whereas when he was down in the forest, everything was dark and gloomy, and they were being attacked by spiders or something too, I think. But anyways. That resonated with me at that moment in my life, and I found kind of a reassurance and things like that. But looking back on that, I wouldn't say that was necessarily, due to some kind of, what's the word, divine intervention or something like that. I would say that, that's kind of a theme that resonates with humans in general, particularly when they're feeling down or beaten down or something like that. But you've indicated in the chat there that you had an instance that came to your mind. Go ahead and relate that.
Yeah, just one simple one is, I think there's this passage in the Bible that says that, uh, that every man will proclaim his own goodness, and and that's just one thing that I've noticed when I'm talking with people that uh, I I don't think I think just virtually every person that I've ever talked to who's not been a believer, um, says things like, yeah, I'm a good person, and so that's just like one of those things that is so many times that people say that to me, it is just like, well, they're just reaffirming that that biblical message. So that would be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, but it's something that people generally believe. So, I mean, it just, uh, I don't know. To me, that those kinds of things aren't very persuasive, just for the fact that, um, there are. I mean, I suppose there are people who believe that they are bad, um, but I think most people in general um, try to be good and generally think that they are okay at being good. Wouldn't you think that that's true?
Um, well, yeah,
Like
I mean,
you wouldn't say that you're a. Are you a bad person?
uh, well, I mean, you could say that. I would certainly identify myself as a person who sins, and I would equate sin as something bad. So I don't think that would be inaccurate for you to say. I'm a bad person who's trying to
Yeah,
live good.
sure. Okay. I mean, okay. To me, that seems like you're kind of making things conform to what the text says there, as far as your own perceptions of things, right? At least that's the way I would see that. But um, I mean, you could take that for how you want, and you may disagree. Um, is there one of the things that I like to ask believers is, um, you know, what obviously you've kind of experienced things that have led you to believe that the Bible is true, and you're convinced that that's the case. What kinds of things would suggest to you, if the world was different in some way, that the Bible wasn't true? Um, that uh, that it was in error,
Oh
or
yeah, I mean,
maybe something that would cast just a little bit of doubt, so that maybe, let's say you're at 98 percent on that scale. If you came across X, you might slip to 97% of belief, that it would cast just a smidge of doubt, or maybe something that would say, you would throw your hands up and say, well, this can't be true then, and throw you all the way down. Can you think of any kinds of examples of things like that?
sure, that's happened multiple times because like I've read a lot of anti-Bible and anti-Christian books and materials by people, and so anytime you read these books, they're um, the conclusion of whatever the book is that I'm reading is going to be one that's going to want to make me to doubt. And so there's been multiple times I read this book by this Muslim scholar. I think his name is Ahmed Deedat, and I think he wrote this book called the Bible, the Word of God or Word of Man. And so his book, he basically goes through there and he's attacking the Bible the whole time, and showing all these contradictions and everything like that. And when you read these things at first, um, it does. It makes you feel uneasy, um, and you're like, and then of course it's funny too because when you read one by a Muslim scholar, then the thought in the back of your head is like, well, uh, maybe the Quran is true. But if you read one put out by an atheist, then the thought that subliminally kind of pops in your head is, well, maybe God doesn't exist. which is just kind of funny how that affects a person. But so there's been ones like that that I've read by other books, and they present things that seem like they're problems, and at first uh, they do kind of bother me, and those thoughts in the back of my head pop through. They're like, man, what if I've been serving something that's totally false all the time? How's my life going to change if I find out this isn't true? And all that stuff pops into my head. But what I've always done in the past with these things is that, of course, I don't just believe whatever the argument is that I'm being presented with. I look into it a little bit. I study about it. I pray about it. And usually in the process of doing all those things, there's always an answer that comes forth to me that is satisfactory. And I remember one instance in particular. There was something in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, it says that this guy was buried in this one city. But then if you go to like the book of Genesis and read, it says that he's buried in a different city. And so I'm sitting here scratching my head about this, and I was trying to reason all these things out in my head. And I remember at one point I looked at the explanation that I was positing, and in my own head I said to myself, I said, that's a ridiculous reason. That totally makes no sense whatsoever. And so there was some part of me that would not allow me to go for a jive answer. Like I had to have something more substantial and solid. And sure enough, something else, was, I would say, revealed to me later. And so, the short answer to your question would be just a simple problem. Because, for me, I believe that the Word of God is, without errors. And I know that not a lot of Christians hold that view. But for somebody who does like me, all you would have to show me just one tiny little mistake, and then that would kind of pose a big problem for me. And so far, I have yet to come across any irreconcilable problems.
Okay. Are you familiar with Bart Ehrman? I mean, to me, I I went to a Christian college and took some classes. I didn't finish my degree at a Christian college, but I did take like Old Testament literature and New Testament literature and several kind of book studies while I was there getting my general ed courses done. And even kind of the professors at this evangelical Christian university who were themselves kind of fundamentalist believers in I guess as true a sense of the word as you could get. They believed that the Bible was God's word. I think that they did concede that there were that it wasn't inerrant. I think they would have said that it was infallible, meaning that you could trust it and that it was the perfect message, what we needed to hear for humanity, is essentially. But there were problems with it due to just transmission and those kinds of things.
Right. Yeah. Well, you bring up another topic, which is a very interesting one, which is the aspect of textual criticism, which is very inappropriate, or very appropriate that you brought up Bart Ehrman, because I know that he does a lot of study into that, and I read his book Jesus Interrupted, and honestly, as far as Bible, critics of the Bible go, I actually appreciate Bart Ehrman a lot more than a lot of the other ones. So that's one plus he's got going for him.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that wasn't that kind of issue wasn't what ultimately led me, to I guess abandon my faith. It wasn't really something that I set out to do or whatever. I realized one day that I really didn't believe anymore. But it wasn't due to conflicts within the scripture on that level by any means. Let me ask you another question. Do you believe in a literal hell? Do you think that hell is an eternal place, and that it's, basically people will burn there for eternity if they do not receive salvation through faith in Christ.
I'm glad that you broke down what you meant a little bit more by referring to it as literal, because uh, I believe that it is a real location. Um, Now I think the Bible clearly teaches that people are going to spend eternity in the lake of fire, which would be distinct from hell. Um, but for the sake of your argument, I would recognize both hell and the lake of fire as literal places. I would say that there are obviously some people who are going to, spend eternity in the lake of fire. Now, as far as whether or not there are, it's a literal lake of burning flames or lava or whatever you want to call that. Um, I don't really know. I'm not really. Uh, I don't really know how to take that, simply for the fact that um, often when the Bible talks about the abode of the wicked, uh, it talks about it in so many different ways, even ways that you would consider contradictory. Like it says how the wicked will be destroyed, but then in another part of Scripture it'll say that people are in everlasting destruction. In one area it'll be flames. In another description it'll be darkness. And if we put all these things together and take them literally, then there'd be some clear contradictions that wouldn't really make sense, which makes me to lead me to believe that either some of them are literal and the other ones are allegorical, or they're all allegorical, simply used to describe what the state of the wicked is going to be like. And I think I might tend to lean toward the latter of those two, but I haven't really done a lot of extensive study on it, simply because uh, I personally don't really see how that's important.
Okay. Um, to me, uh, when I was a believer, I thought that the the text was fairly compelling, toward kind of this idea of a more literal lake of fire where people were being um, basically burned alive for eternity. That was the position that I came to believe. Um, at least that's what the text said, from the way I read it anyhow. Now I can understand, there are, like you said, there are other passages and things where things might get a bit more murky with regard to that, and so there might be some question marks there. Um, would it, is so one of the things that I kind of grappled with was the idea of, well, can I judge this God's character, his moral character, as he's described in the Bible? And one of the things that really tripped me up, and this was something that was influential in kind of the demise of my own faith, was the idea that if it's at all possible that there is an eternal place of punishment for the lives that we live here on Earth, um, that in my mind that didn't seem just. And so I'm wondering, if there is a literal hell or lake of fire, if that's the way you read it, where people are quite literally burned alive. I mean, this Jordanian pilot that we saw recently burned alive. I mean, that was horrific, and he suffered, uh, you know, considerably for a brief period of time, relatively speaking. But in the long run, that won't be anything compared to if people are actually being burned alive for all of eternity. Um, would that change your opinion of a God that actually did that?
Um,
And it wasn't it wasn't figurative or allegorical.
Oh, I see. Uh, no, it really wouldn't, simply because the I, I don't um, judge who God is by his actions. I judge who God is by his character, and so it yeah, it wouldn't make any difference.
How can you judge character without evaluating actions?
Well, there's a bit of a problem because you for example, if you were at some train tracks, right, and you uh, saw this train coming down, and you saw this other guy, and he was there by the switches, and he went and he flipped the switch, and then you saw that train, and it went onto a track where there was a guy who didn't see it coming, and you ran him over. Um, you would probably think that man had done something wrong. Um, you would use your perception, and you would say, he's done something wrong, and judging by his actions, I'm judging his character that he's a wrong person. But maybe he was, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this argument, but maybe he was diverting. Maybe the train had, like 100 passengers on it, and the other track that it was about to go on ended and was about to go off a cliff. So his action was actually doing something positive in the long run. However, your perception of it, because you didn't see and know the whole picture and how the future was going to play out, would skew your figuring out what kind of his character was like. And so
Shoot, are you there? I can't hear you, Shawn. If you're still there, you froze up. Either that or it's frozen up on my end. Are you
okay,
still
yeah,
there?
yeah, no,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I think so. I'm not sure where I froze up on that, but I was basically saying how um, since I don't know how an action is going to play out in the future, and I might not know all the facts of the situation, for me to make a judgment about somebody's character based on me seeing just a single part of it um, may not be accurate.
Well, I mean, I understand that, but at the same time, I would, in that situation, I would be compelled to find out what the situation was, and so I would go ask that guy, why did he do what he did, and I would expect a reasonable answer that justified, um, those actions.
I,
And to me, if you're following a leader, who, especially if it's someone who is powerful, um, I think that you would have to hold that individual to a high standard for the fact that they are powerful, and say, okay, you have to answer for your actions. And if you can't provide a reasonable explanation for things that seem really uh, immoral, at least on the face value, then you're not worthy of the power, or certainly servitude and support. Um, and I would apply that in any situation in life, with regard to, like, let's say a political leader, or even in a workplace or something. Those people who have control and have power in things, are that much more. It's that much more important, I suppose, to ensure that what seems um, questionable, at least, has legitimate answers that justify what their actions were.
yeah, I like to one explanation I heard, which makes sense to me, is that oftentimes in this world, especially in court situations, when you see people, get sentenced to things, a lot of times um, the penalty will show you the seriousness of the crime. So if you read something about, this guy got 60 hours of community service, well, you can deduce that whatever he did was not that big of a deal. And if another guy got 2 life sentences, you can deduce that what he did was very serious. And so if we to take that in the biblical realm and you were to say that somebody faces everlasting destruction, well, that would show you that what they did was of the utmost bad level. And I think the one thing that at the very least, that unbelievers have a tendency to do is they have a tendency to downplay sin and make sin seem like it's really not a big deal. When I think just the fact that the penalty is so serious should indicate the seriousness of the offense.
Okay. I mean, I would I would have some trouble seeing it that way, especially given the fact that it doesn't actually matter what your offenses are on Earth. You could be Hitler or Jeffrey Dahmer, according to the gospel, and still escape any kind of penalty at all, so long as you genuinely believed and genuinely have a spirit of repentance before you're dead, and you could be, you know, by all earthly standards and measures, a really decent person who went out of your way to help people and be kind and generous and all, all of these virtues that we all embrace, and yet just failed to hold the right beliefs, and then you're punished for eternity. And in some cases, you would never even, perhaps maybe never even heard this gospel message. That just doesn't seem just in any sense of the word to me.
Well, I think when you said beliefs is really just uh, is kind of it really goes to describe more what kind of like the decisions that a person makes. Because like one thing that I think you said is you said if a person was truly repentant, um, that's a person making a decision, right? Meaning that whatever God is showing them, that they're moving forward and going forward with that. And and biblically speaking, God is revealing Himself to everyone via His creation. So it starts there, and you know, people have consciences as well too. How do they respond to their consciences? And obviously, some people are going to, respond in accordance with it, and other people are going to live according to their own will. So, nobody's really going to have any excuses, when they stand before God as far as, well, I didn't get the right facts of the story. Yeah, I would say no.
Okay. Uh, um, I just have one more question for you, and I've got to get going before too long because I have to pick up my son from work. But in I know from a lot of just my experience in my own time as a believer that people a lot of times will say, well, God uses people to carry out His work on earth here, and uh, you know we can't see Him directly necessarily, but we see His work through these other people and things. Um, you know, I've been wondering lately, like, what if this was true and you went to heaven, and heaven was very similar, that you really didn't get to see a deity, but you got directives from some person who supposedly had communication from that deity, and let's say, your part of, quote unquote worship was to stoke the fires of the lake of fire. Would that kind of version of an afterlife be satisfactory to you, uh, or would you at some point say, gee, gee, this sucks, and it's just really not what it was cracked up to be?
Uh, okay, let's see. So I'm I if you can't answer this question of mine, then I'll just go ahead and move forward. But my question in regards to answer yours would be, um, this afterlife that you're describing, would it be an afterlife of everlasting joy?
I don't know. I mean, let's say that it's not, for the sake of argument. That you
Okay,
just, maybe you have. I'm sure you have some joy in your life now, right?
sure.
I mean, I feel like I do as well. I mean, I really enjoy spending time with my wife. We have pets. We have two sons, who give me a lot of joy. I enjoy just even having discussions with people on the internet, and at my work. I have joy here. But let's say that you didn't experience anything more in this afterlife when you get there than you have in your life now.
Hmm. Uh, well, then I would. So, refresh me of your original question. You asked me, would this be what?
Would you be satisfied with
Oh,
that experience? Especially so,
uh,
one of the pieces of that was, maybe one of your tasks in this afterlife was occasionally to, participate in stoking the flames of the lake of fire, and maybe you could even hear people as they're being punished. Um, how would that resonate with you? What would your perception of that be like? And clearly, this is just purely hypothetical.
I
Um,
think,
but
I think not only would I be satisfied, but I would probably be. I would say that I would be even have a more joyful, uh, a higher level of joy than I do in this current life. So I think yes, I would be satisfied, and even more so than in this current life.
okay, all right. Well, that's really all I had lined out as far as questions for you. I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope you've you've enjoyed it some too. I know it's sometimes it can be goofy. You might be like, well, what the heck is this guy asking me these stupid questions for? But uh, these are things that I've thought about, and so I kind of wanted to have your take on it too. So
I tell people my answers are
I
either I tell people my answers are either going to be revelation, like I'm going to quote you something from the Bible, or it's going to be speculation, which is just whatever I'm thinking in my head. And I think I've drawn the division of those two lines pretty obvious today.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. That's fine, and I won't I won't hold you accountable for or come back at you and say, ah ha ha, I gotcha. So, well, it's been a pleasure. Do you have any closing thoughts, or I'll let you have the last word here?
No, that's fine. I actually thought we were going to talk about slavery today, so but another
Oh,
time
I'm
maybe.
sorry. Yeah,
But
sure, yeah, absolutely.
but
That's an
yeah,
interesting
no,
topic
that's
too.
perfectly fine. You had your questions that you're curious about, and that's perfectly reasonable, and I answer them to the best of my ability. So thank you.
Well, I think you did great. All right. Well, you have a good night. I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast. Thanks anyone who's been watching. We had at least one or two viewers, and I'm sure other people will jump on as this gets posted and things. So thanks viewers. Pass it on.